Picture this, a grown woman in a wedding dress sitting on the floor outside a wedding venue, screaming and kicking her legs like a toddler. That woman was my sister, and it was the best wedding gift I ever received. My sister showed up to my wedding in a wedding dress. My parents had planned it that way. What they didn't plan was us. I need to give you just enough background to understand why what happened was so satisfying. Growing up, my parents loved my sister more, not in subtle ways, openly, obviously, and without apology. If she accused me of something, I was punished. If I accused her, I wasn't believed. Her birthday cake flavor, her choice of restaurant, her curfew rules that never applied to me even when I reached the same age. She was the miracle child they tried for. I was the unplanned one that came too soon after. I've made my peace with that. My sister, spoiled and used to getting everything, decided somewhere in our teens that I was her enemy. She sabotaged my friendships. She accused every boyfriend I brought home of flirting with her, and my parents believed her every time. I stopped bringing anyone home. What saved me was studying. I couldn't go out, so I studied, and I got a full scholarship to a decent college, announced it on social media simultaneously with telling my parents so they couldn't quietly shut it down. My mom had already told me they had no money for my education. She was right, they just hadn't planned on me not needing any. College was my escape. Distance softened my memory of how bad things really were. Then I met my husband. People were baffled we got together. I'm a doormat who cries when I'm angry and lies awake at night thinking of what I should have said. He's the guy who doesn't clap back immediately, not because he's forgiven you, but because he's planning something worse. He loves drama the way some people love puzzles. He wants to solve it, loudly, with maximum satisfaction. He was thrilled to meet my family. He went armed with a hidden recorder, mentally rehearsing all the ways he'd reject my sister's inevitable flirting and spread the recording to every relative we had. He came back euphoric. "Babe, you will not believe what they want." He wisely told me to hear him out before listening to the recording so I wouldn't misunderstand his reaction. My parents and sister had sat him down and made their offer. They would pay for our wedding. One condition: my sister would walk down the aisle first, in a wedding dress, on my wedding day, at my venue, with photos, cake, the whole experience, because it wasn't right for a younger sister to marry before an older one. He said he needed to think about it. Then he drove home, vibrating with schemes. We spent an evening coming up with increasingly unhinged revenge plans before his level-headed brother talked us down from the ones that could get us sued. What we landed on was beautifully simple. Pretend to agree, hire security, don't let her in. But my husband, being my husband, couldn't leave it there. He went back to my parents with a plan within the plan. He told them I was controlling and distrustful, bad judgment with men, you know how she is, and that I checked his phone constantly. Therefore, nothing about this arrangement could ever be put in writing. All discussions would happen in person at their house. My parents bought it. My sister literally skipped with joy, and so began months of glorious, expensive deception. Since my parents wanted input in everything, my husband used every decision as an opportunity. He'd take my sister to try the cheaper menu options, then sigh about how it was a shame we didn't want to abuse their generosity. My sister would immediately demand my parents upgrade everything. Suddenly, they were paying for the best photographer, the best catering, the best flowers, all things they thought they were doing for my sister's grand moment. The only snag was my dress. They wanted me in something hideous. Since my mom had texted me about it, there was a paper trail of me agreeing, which we couldn't use. I refused in writing, stood my ground. My husband went over, pretended to negotiate, and came back with a solution. My sister suggested ruining my actual dress so I'd have no choice. My husband pretended to agree. He later showed up at their house with leftover fabric scraps from my alterations as fake proof he'd done it. He said he had to get back because I was raging. He'd see them at the wedding. We had, between us, barely spent anything on what turned out to be a beautiful, expensive wedding. We called it back pay for emotional damages. The day arrived. The plan my parents believed was in motion. Wait until all guests were seated, send my sister in at the last moment, too late for me to stop anything, and have her walk the aisle first. By the time I knew what happened, it would be done. What they didn't know was that our security team had quietly taken their positions only after my parents were already seated inside. A friend who was in on everything sat among the guests with her phone, ready to text me when my dad moved to the entrance. We couldn't have anyone in the wedding party checking phones without arousing suspicion. The music started. The bridesmaids walked. My dad stood at the entrance waiting for my sister. The doors opened, and I walked in. My dad's face went white. He looked behind me trying to see what had happened at the entrance. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. He mumbled something came up and left me standing there alone. The gasps were immediate. My friend, right on cue, called out loudly, "What did he mean it wasn't supposed to be you?" I want to say the tears were acting, they weren't entirely. Even after everything, some part of me hadn't believed he'd actually leave me at the altar to go deal with my sister. That part was wrong, so the tears were real. But then my father-in-law sprinted down the aisle to take my arm, and I smiled. I walked to my husband through a church full of whispers. When I reached him, he told me my devastated face deserved an Oscar, and not to worry, he'd rake them over the coals for what they did. We got married without a hitch. Outside, it was chaos. My sister had arrived in a full wedding dress. Security informed her there must be some mistake, as there was already a bride inside. My dad threatened to call the police. Security welcomed that, since he'd been hired by us and doing his job perfectly. My parents, cornered and desperate, threw my husband under the bus, told everyone he'd been in on it for months. My husband was summoned. He walked out, looked around at the scene, my sister on the ground, screaming and kicking her legs like a child, my mother in tears, my father cycling between purple and white, composed his face into confusion, and denied everything. He demanded proof. There was none. "Wow, how convenient," he said. Then he tore them apart in front of everyone for being the kind of parents who would try to steal their daughter's wedding day, and went back inside to dance at our reception. No one believed them. Family and guests ripped into them from every direction. For the first time in my life, I watched my parents get accused of something and have no one come to their defense. My sister had to be dragged off the ground by my father when they were finally asked to leave. Inside, I didn't know the details yet. I just knew that for once, something that was supposed to be mine was actually mine. The food was incredible, the flowers were perfect, everyone was kind and warm in the way that made the whole night feel like it was genuinely for me. My husband says the expensive food and open bar helped. He's probably right. From our honeymoon, my husband screenshotted my sister's unhinged message accusing him of being a two-faced snake who fooled them for months. His words, "I'm printing that and putting it on our wall," along with my parents' harassment and threats, and posted all of it to the family group chat. He closed with a heartfelt plea that no one share our location, lest my parents send my sister over and then claim he had somehow agreed to that too. Family rallied. The silence since then has been golden. I would have preferred a normal, loving family at my wedding, but since that wasn't on offer, this was the next best thing. They didn't just fail to ruin it, they paid for it.